Tune in for a tale, words that set sail.
Digital Splendor, Literature Illuminated.
Have you ever looked at a group of people and just wondered, why? Why can a bunch of smart, perfectly rational individuals suddenly become a single, irrational mob? Well, way back in 1895, a really controversial book tried to answer that exact question. Today, we're going to break down Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd, a work that's influenced leaders for over 100 years. And you'll see, its ideas might be more relevant now than ever. I mean, it's a puzzle we've all seen, right? Whether it's online or out on the streets. How can a collection of individuals, each with their own brain, suddenly start acting with one single and often pretty foolish mind? Well, this French theorist, Gustave Le Bon, he was convinced he'd cracked the code more than a century ago. Okay, so to really get what Le Bon was talking about, you have to picture the world he was living in. We're talking the end of the 19th century. He's looking around, he sees all this upheaval, and he declares that society is stepping into a brand new, defining historical phase, the era of crowds. He saw the old foundations of the world, the big institutions like the church and the monarchies, and they were all starting to crumble. And as they fell, something new, something unpredictable, and something incredibly powerful was rising up to take their place. This wasn't a power directed by kings or priests. This was a force bubbling up from the masses themselves. And this was the absolute key for Le Bon. The fate of nations, he said, wasn't going to be decided in some quiet room by a bunch of princes anymore. Nope, it was going to be decided in the loud, passionate, beating heart of the crowd. The voice of the people was becoming the main force shaping the world, for better or for worse. All right, so if crowds are this new world power, what exactly is a crowd? For Le Bon, it was way more than just a bunch of people standing near each other. He believed it becomes a totally new entity, something with a mind of its very own, the collective mind. Le Bon says that when people form what he calls a psychological crowd, something kind of magical or maybe even terrifying happens. Your individual personality, poof, it just vanishes. And in its place, this single, unified, collective mind is born. It's a completely new being that plays by its own set of rules. And just look at this contrast he draws. It's night and day, right? On your own, you're rational, you feel responsible, you're in control. But the second you get absorbed into a crowd, all that conscious stuff just evaporates. Suddenly, you're driven by instinct. That feeling of responsibility is gone, and you can end up doing things you would never, ever do alone. So how in the world does this happen? Le Bon pinpoints three main forces. First, being in a group makes you feel anonymous, which gives you this sense of invincible power. Second, this thing he calls contagion kicks in, where ideas and emotions just spread like a virus. And third, you become extremely suggestible, almost like you're hypnotized. You become, as he puts it, an autonoman, no longer guided by your own will. Okay, so if a crowd has a mind, what's it actually like? What's going on upstairs? Well, Le Bon paints a very specific picture, and let's just say it's not a very flattering one. He basically describes a primitive mind. A crowd doesn't reason, it just feels. It doesn't see shades of gray. Everything is black and white. It's impulsive, it's intolerant, and it'll believe almost anything you tell it without a second thought. For Le Bon, joining a crowd is basically an intellectual downgrade. And to show just how easily a crowd can be fooled, Le Bon shares this incredible true story from the high seas. It's the perfect example of how a whole group of people can hallucinate the exact same thing, something that just isn't there. So picture this. The whole crew is on high alert, looking for a lost ship. Then one guy on watch signals that he sees something, and through contagion, that one little suggestion becomes an absolute reality for everyone. Every single person, from the newest sailor to the captain, instantly sees a raft full of shipwrecked men. They hear voices, they see them waving, until they sail right up to it and realize it's just a bunch of leafy tree branches floating in the water. And this really just sums it all up for Le Bon. You could be a brilliant, sophisticated person on your own, but the second you get swept up in the group mind, you revert to a more primitive state. In a crowd, you become a barbarian, acting purely on instinct. So, if crowds are this irrational, how on earth do you lead them? How do you control them? This was a huge question for Le Bon, and his answers, well, they've been studied by leaders ever since. According to Le Bon, if you want to influence a crowd, you don't appeal to its intellect, you appeal to its imagination. Forget about logic, forget about facts and figures. You need powerful images, simple slogans, and bold, confident statements. You don't persuade a crowd, you seduce it. He basically gives you a 3-step playbook. First, affirmation. You just make your statement, make it bold and simple, no proof needed. Second, repetition. You say it again and again and again. And finally, you just let contagion do the work. The idea spreads like wildfire, and pretty soon that repeated statement isn't an opinion anymore. It's treated like a proven fact. Okay, but here's where his argument takes a really fascinating turn. Le Bon claims that once an idea truly grabs hold of a crowd, it stops being just a political opinion or a social theory. It becomes a holy doctrine. The belief itself doesn't have to be about a god, but the way the crowd holds onto it with absolute fanaticism is identical to religious faith. So it doesn't matter if the object of worship is a real god, a king, a political hero, or even an abstract idea like freedom. Le Bon says the psychological machinery is exactly the same. The crowd worships it, submits to it without question, and cannot stand any dissent. Anyone who questions the dogma isn't just wrong, they're an enemy. But wait, it's not all bad. Le Bon doesn't just paint crowds as these big, dumb, destructive monsters. In the final part of his book, he reveals what he sees as their great paradox. He sees this powerful, dual nature inside every single crowd. He argues that a crowd is like a powerful weapon with no morality of its own. It's not inherently good or evil. Which way it points, towards crime or towards heroism, depends entirely on the suggestion it's given. The very same collective energy that can fuel a riot can also inspire an incredible act of bravery. And he says history is full of examples, from the volunteers in the French Revolution to religious martyrs. An individual, they might hesitate, they might calculate the risk, but a crowd, swept up in a grand idea, will charge ahead to defend a cause or a country without a second thought for their own lives. So that's really the big takeaway here. The act of joining a crowd isn't just about being in a group. It's a profound transformation. It's about surrendering the very thing that makes you you, your individual critical reason, to a collective instinctual mind. Understanding that idea is the key to seeing both the amazing and the terrifying power of groups throughout all of history. Now, obviously, Le Bon was writing about physical crowds, people gathered together in a square, but his ideas about contagion and suggestion and simple, powerful ideas, they pose a really compelling question for us today. In our hyper-connected world of social media and online mobs, are we all kind of living in one giant global crowd now? It's definitely something to think about.